And talk about this. When it comes to advising on mergers and acquisitions, three banks remain on top. Citi, I'm afraid, is not among them. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and JPMorgan have tightened their grip on the merger advisory market this year, capturing 36% of it. Joining us now for more on this story is our own Christine Harper. Christine, you know, we had the financial system bailout. Everybody was supposed to be too big to fail. It looks as though the strong just got stronger.
Exactly. I mean, the surprise here, and I will warn that extrapolating from 2 quarters of data is not what anybody in this business does. But so far, what we're not seeing is the boutiques, the companies that were small, that never needed government money, stealing market share from the banks that have taken the government money. The conventional wisdom was that these banks were going to be weakened, their best people were going to leave, and they weren't going to be able to keep doing business for their clients to the extent they have. Instead, they've gained market share, and that's a combination of they have great brand names, they have client relationships, but they can also lend.
Now, what does this mean, though? We heard from, among other people, John Mack, CEO of Morgan Stanley. He was among those who cried loudest about the bailout and how it would affect his hiring ability. They're sitting on top of the merger market right now.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt they have been losing people, however. I mean, he was interesting. At the annual meeting, he talked about an exodus of bankers. And then later, when he was asked about it, he said, oh, that's too strong of a word. So they've lost some people, but not as much as they sometimes like to describe it. But and that's the question, is going forward, whether the number of bankers that have moved on to these littler firms will be able to steal some of the market share. Some people think that will happen.
Now, does this end up being worse for clients in terms of pricing power? Because you saw for a while there was this hegemony over merger advice, and you could pretty much guarantee that you couldn't get a deal done for less than a certain price. This only makes that oligopoly stronger. Well,
Guy Muskowski wrote a note after meeting with some of the senior Goldman Sachs executives on May 29th, and he described how David Solomon, who runs investment banking at Goldman Sachs, said that what tends to happen in periods when the M&A market is weak is that the strong firms win more market share and have more pricing power. So that indeed looks like clients right now are going to the firms they know and that can provide financing regardless of price.
Is there anything we can say here about Citi's operation? We were talking about Citibank before. Citibank and JPMorgan for a long, Citigroup, I should say, and JPMorgan used to kind of battle it out for that second tier below Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. Now JPMorgan is in the top tier. Citi isn't exactly nowhere to be seen, but they're not really in the same running, are they?
You know, I remember so clearly in 2002 when you talked to people at JPMorgan, and all they wanted to be was Citi. Back then, Citigroup was the bank that had succeeded in the model, and JPMorgan, you know, right after their Chase deal, it was all a question. It looked like it might not work. Now the tables have totally reversed. JPMorgan seems to have clearly established itself in that bulge bracket, and Citigroup, there's a lot of questions about its future, as you described earlier on this program.
Now, is JPMorgan throwing balance sheet at this? Because one of the bitter complaints of the Morgan Stanleys and Goldman Sachses of the world was always, well, they just lend money and that's how they get merger business.
Sure. I mean, we had a source close to RWE, the German utility, that said, you know, yes, they hired JPMorgan for the first time to do an M&A deal for them this year, and a big part of that was because it's a big bank and they could provide financing, and sure enough, they have. So that's obviously a competitive advantage, but it used to be a competitive advantage for Citi, not as much right now, it seems.
Let's talk, though, about what this means going forward, because if you look at the M&A volumes that we've seen thus far, they're down about 2/3 from where we were 2 years ago. Everybody says M&A is going to bounce back, but will it bounce back enough for this market share to be really meaningful for these firms?
Well, I mean, that is, of course, is a big question. How much will the boutiques start to be able to win business away? The other point is the M&A market isn't a very big business. I mean, Goldman Sachs has, in the first quarter, they made more than $500 million in M&A fees. That is almost a rounding error in their business. Just fixed income trading alone made $6.5 billion. So, I mean, it's not even a big business for these companies, and yet they are still dominating it.
But you do see cycles, that changes in cycles,
sure,
right? Sometimes trading is dominant as it is right now, but you could see M&A come back big time.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, right now it looks like if trading wasn't impacted through this as much as people thought, then it won't.
All right. You know, Christine, I would love to continue talking about this, but we do need to look at some Apple headlines, so I'll say thank you very much.
Okay.
Bloomberg's own Christine Harper telling us about M&A.